Hi, it's James, and welcome back to the Green Room. This week, I'm joined by Sophie from AdNet Zero. Sophie, now that we're in the green room, I want to know what's the one biggest pet peeve you've got when it comes to the workplace and ESG?
Probably not. This isn't a terribly corporate answer, but the fact that people cannot stack a dishwasher very well in the workplace drives me nuts. And people's inability to recycle properly. I don't know what they do in their own homes. I don't know how they behave, whether just plates are strewn around their kitchen, whether there's just recycling all over the place and they can't follow basic directions about what goes in what bin. But as far as I'm concerned, they're living in absolute squalor based on what they behave like in the workplace. But yeah, it baffles me how people change that behavior in the workplace compared to when they're at home. Um, that would probably be my biggest pet peeve. And I've seen it. I mean, I've been to a lot of different offices. I've worked in lots of different places and it's everywhere. There's not one particular business that does it. It's universal.
Oh, it's rife. I've been to a few
Well,
clients and even more companies as well. I think as well, people have the magic sink philosophy. If I put something in the
oh,
sink, it's going to end up in the dishwasher nice and clean, and then someone will take it out of the dishwasher for me. Tends People don't realize actually it's not a thing.
right. There aren't fairies in your office that magically do this for you. You have to behave like an adult. This is part and parcel of behaving like a human being adult. So yeah, that
Part of growing up, big time. It's
drives me
part of growing
crazy.
up.
Yeah. So that would be it for me.
That's understandable. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with you for a while now in previous roles, and I know you're passionate about sustainability. What was the moment you realized you couldn't not speak up about the topic?
It wasn't a hard and fast moment, but I mean this is going to sound a little bit trite, but I came back from maternity leave in 2022 after having my first daughter. And I was looking at my job spec, I was looking at what the business were trying to achieve, and I was looking at the state of the industry. And sustainability was relatively high on the agenda of the industry at that point, coming out of the back of COVID. And I also saw this appetite amongst the employee base to do more sustainable things in their employee life rather than just in their personal life. And all of these sort of aspects joined together for me to really want to drive that initiative forward. The business that I was at last, I was also in the out of home industry, which to me it operates in the outside world. That is the world in which we are facing. That's the world that is changing, and that is the world that is being affected. So it kind of felt like the right thing to be doing. And there was some opportunity, I think, to work with B Corp and to be able the application process, the assessment process, which is how we got introduced. And from there, it opened my eyes to the complete insanity of sustainability, really, because it's not something that you consider to be so big when you're working in quite a specific area of business. It just took over my life. The more that I worked on it, the more that I realized how enormous it was and how important it was for the private sector and for businesses to be paying attention and to do something about it. So I just took the mantle and figured that it would be an opportunity that I couldn't really pass up. Luckily, I had a lot of support and I had some brilliant people to work with, but the switch didn't flick overnight with regards to people being interested. It did take a while, but yeah, that's where it started for me. And it became more and more important, became more of an interest, passion, and eventually a career. I hope it will be.
No, definitely. I mean, it is, right?
In
Um,
theory, right now it is. I'll stop in a couple of weeks' time to have another baby, and then I'll come back and see what's happened next because the pace of change and sustainability is mad. But yeah, for me, this is the trajectory that I want to remain on.
uh, you mentioned there kind of coming back from maternity leave was potentially that. Did you see that as a driver, or you seeing the world in a slightly different way?
I think you just do see the world a bit differently. You get a completely different perspective on your role. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a sustainability based sort of realization. It can be any realization about your role. I had lots of other ways of approaching the strategy at my last business that I could only really have done if I'd had that time out and not been as close to the business as I was. So it was the time away that helped, but it also was the opportunity to think about the legacy that I'm leaving behind for my family. which again just sound a little bit sick out the nose, but it's something that I really believe was a motivator for me, and it is often a motivator for other people as well. I've heard that from other people across the industry.
Oh yeah, when we've spoken to people before around why are you doing this, if it's not inherently tied to business needs, it's often a driver of personal ambition. And it's like the reason I want to do this is to the effect it's going to have on my kids or my grandkids or whatever it may be. So it is a pretty powerful motivator when it comes to that. And as part of that as well, you mentioned that your company were buying into it. What was giving you the confidence internally to continue pushing it? Because as you mentioned, it's not smooth sailing. It doesn't happen overnight. What kind of made you stay on that track?
You guys helped. Future Reeved helped a lot with regards to opening my eyes to the different ways in which you could approach it and the different ways in which it could come to fruition. But it was small wins, small conversations that we would have in the kitchen. It was small policies being introduced. It was meetings that were taking place, or a member of the client team coming up to us and saying, I've got this client that really wants to talk to us about sustainability. I would love us to create a session together. And all of those small wins laddered up to making me feel like we were making a difference. I think, again, it happened over time. It was a really important part of the process, but yeah, not an easy one necessarily.
I mean, I completely agree. It's never easy in that space. One thing I do remember you doing and doing it very well was the conversation you had at the board level and how
Mhm.
you had understood the language of how to speak to certain people in certain ways in order to make the change that you thought had to happen. Are you able to divulge a little bit more on the approach you took there?
Yeah, I think we were having quite a few conversations with stakeholders at a senior level for maybe 6 months, up to a year actually. And it was relatively well supported, but there was no tangible or real acceleration to sustainability in the business. And I ended up talking to the private equity business that was a part of Talon, and they had an ESG team. And they helped me to see that if we position this in a financial capacity, the board are likely to pay far more attention to what the risks and opportunities could be. So I worked with them a little bit to understand what our client portfolio looked like, how many of them had set SBTI targets, how many of them we formed a material part of the supply chain for, and therefore what our revenue risk could actually look like in the short, medium, and long term. And when you walk into a boardroom and you say, in the next 5 years, a third of our revenue could walk out the door, you have everyone's attention. If you walk into a boardroom and say, "Hi guys, I'd really like you all to use a keep cup and a tote bag," they're not going to be interested. So that type of narrative was one of the sort of switch flips at the business, and they started to help me work really closely with the private equity business, and consequently bring over someone from Ernst and Young into the business as a full-time sustainability manager, and continue on the path of looking at what the opportunity really was for us to differentiate as a business, be well positioned to future proof our business, and also to motivate our employee base, to attract more talent. There was loads of positives that could come from being a business that really had sustainability at the heart of its business strategy rather than something that felt siloed. But stakeholder engagement is something that I really enjoy. It's really tricky because everyone has different motivators when it comes to sustainability, because it's such a personal topic for people. It's quite an emotive topic. So you have to approach things very differently. You have to have very different conversations with a marketing team, a finance team, a business development team, a client team. And I quite like that. But it's a really important part of the process and something that I learned quite a bit over time, and is definitely helping in my job now because we have upwards of 200 supporters, but a huge amount of different stakeholders across the board as well. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that bit actually.
And looking at the stakeholders, so you've taken that leap to spread this message more in the role you've got within AdNet Zero. And I guess you're speaking to a lot of individuals that are either very similar to you, or whether that's taking control within their organization of ESG, or they've been burdened with the tasks, they might see it as of, I've got to do this because I've just been told to do it.
Mm.
Seeing any consistent traits with the people you're speaking to? Are they kind of talking around that financial language to encourage the board, or is it a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to the approach that companies are taking, or the individuals within companies are taking?
This year has been crazy with regards to how people are approaching sustainability, what position they're taking, how they're reacting to certain geopolitical shifts. So there's no like holistic consistency, I would say, at the moment. But I read an article last week from a guy called Joel Macaba from Trellis, and he positioned the sustainability ecosystem at the moment as it's a one of recalibration rather than retreat, which I love as a tagline. And it's something that I've used a little bit in the past couple of months. We talk about a change in communication rather than change in commitment. So whilst there isn't any consistency in what people are saying and how they're approaching sustainability specifically, what I would say is that there is a general theme occurring that people are and businesses are recalibrating to focus on business outcomes, on financial outcomes, on campaign effectiveness. And they're also really doubling down on education, materiality assessments, measurement, benchmarking, target setting. They're not necessarily using sustainability as a way to grab headlines or to make false claims. And that feels like a very risky move to be doing at the moment as a business or as a company. So a lot of them are really thinking about how they change their business internally and how they recalibrate and show that there is a massive opportunity with regards to business success and growth and economic growth when it comes to sustainability. So there's been a slight change. I think a couple of years ago, there were probably a lot of businesses out there using the sustainability angle to differentiate themselves or to grab headlines or to write nice PR pieces, which hopefully that's all disappeared now. That's not necessarily what sustainability should always be about. We need more positive news stories, absolutely, but there's a lot that needs to be done underneath the surface, which I feel like is happening now more so than it ever has done.
And with that as well, having the shift in the motivation, you've obviously got individuals or companies seeing a benefit in it, whether it's stakeholder requests, your PE firm, etc. I think that one thing that we've seen is, especially with more regulatory pieces that are coming across the EU and they've had a backstep in it, essentially is that organizations still want to do something. They've just been trying to latch on to a framework that will help them. And regulation is obviously the easiest one because it's like, you have to do this, and if you don't do this, you're going to get fined, etc. But it's not been something that we've seen people just stop. There is still a drive for it. Where is the industry currently? Where are you seeing the advertising industry going? Because you've worked a lot on kind of the media measurement aspect as well, and how you calculate a carbon footprint for an advertising campaign. Has that continued to progress?
Yes. And I would have said a couple of years ago, the industry were probably not in a good place. We weren't doing things very collaboratively. There were lots of different ways of approaching sustainability, and there are other industries far further ahead. But I've seen in the last couple of years from the advertising and media industry in particular is an acceleration which has put us a significant way further ahead than I thought we could ever get in a couple of years. So I have a lot of faith that trajectory will continue based on the supporter conversations that we have and the appetite to want to be able to calculate emissions baselines and really reduce emissions, either in the short, medium, or long term. And some of those are huge global businesses that are committing to those targets and committing to those principles, and others are really small and they don't have sustainability based resources, but they're still committing to it. So there was a really interesting view in the PwC State of Decarbonisation report that showed that large businesses set targets, well, the majority of large businesses set targets sort of 2020, 2021, based on legislative frameworks that were coming through from EU and UK. and they're now in a relatively progressive position. But what's happening this year, and it's certainly some of which started to happen last year, was the small and medium businesses in the industry were starting to set their targets. So whilst there was less amount of businesses setting targets before, they were the large ones that counted for a significant amount of revenue. But now we're seeing volume. We're seeing volume of businesses wanting to understand sustainability and to really take part on that journey of reducing their emissions. That happens across multiple industries, I suppose, but it's definitely something that we're seeing in the advertising industry. And for AdNet Zero in particular, our supporter base has grown every single year, and we're going to continue to hopefully see that grow. And we're evolving our program to make sure that we can support businesses that have just started out on their journey, and those businesses that set those targets 4 or 5 years ago that are wanting to do something quite ambitious. One of the projects that we're working on, which you mentioned, is the Global Media Sustainability Framework. And that is a way of bringing the whole industry together to align on a global framework for emissions calculations and reporting, baselining, and then hopefully reducing. So that's underway. We're in a really good place. The team are going all out to try and get that sorted by the end of the year, if not early into next year. There's tons of businesses that are feeding into that. There's loads of community engagement. And it's just a really brilliant way to see an industry come together, coalesce around something that's important and move the dial quite quickly. So yeah, I think that we've moved quite fast in a short space of time, and I hopefully don't see that slowing down.
So before we end, I'd like to end on a light note. What's the one thing that makes you hopeful about the future of corporate sustainability right now?
The thing that makes me really hopeful is the younger generation. So at AdNet Zero, we have a young leaders group. And I've worked with a lot of young people in AdNet Zero and previously at different organizations. I find them slightly bonkers. I feel very old in their presence, but they just have so much energy to give to this topic. And they really think about it in the context of their personal and professional lives and how they can bring what they know in their personal lives into their professional roles. The boundaries are blurring. I think they have done since COVID, especially with the way in which we work now. And there's just a real appetite from them to want to adapt their roles and make what they're doing professionally matter on a global level when it comes to sustainability. The way that they approach conversations, they get stuck in, they put their hand up. I think it's brilliant. And I love interviewing for entry level positions in organizations. I just think what the generations are doing at the moment in their free time or in an extracurricular capacity at university is just a completely different level to what I was doing. I was playing netball and I thought that was really good to be part of the sports society. But now they're hosting climate workshops on a weekend. They're cycling from here to Spain to raise money for a social initiative. I think what they're doing is brilliant, and it gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Really, it leaves everyone passionate as well, right? If you're able to implement a workforce like that and a culture like that, it rubs off on everyone. Even if you are the Grinch in the corner, just who's here to do the job and that's it. It does rub off on you, and you hear these stories. Oh, I reckon I could try that as well.
Yeah, they make it so accessible and so relatable that you can't help but love them for it. They're not doing it for any other reason other than they just think it's the right thing to do. And how can you argue with that, even if you are the Luddite in the corner? And there are a lot of Luddites in the corner.
Always, there always will be. And now you're raising your own future generation to take the mantle off you one day, maybe.
I'm trying.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Sophie.
No worries. Nice to speak to you.